Hi guys, my name's Chris Wright. I'm a landscape photographer working in Granada, Spain. Now, this week I wanted to talk about infrared photography. The reason is summer has really kicked off with a bang here in Spain. We've got temperatures today of around about 35 degrees and it's simply too hot and too bright to go out photographing at any time other than really prior to 10 o'clock in the morning and after 8 o'clock at night. So these are the conditions in which infrared photography absolutely comes into its own. Bright sunlight, high contrast, and everything works brilliantly. Now, in order to take photographs with an infrared filter, you've got two choices. One is to attach a screw-on filter to the end of your lens. This isn't it's not my favourite choice, and there are a couple of practical reasons for this. One is that if you've got through the lens viewfinder, you can't actually see anything, so you have to compose your picture before you put the filter on. The other is that it extends the length of the exposure because you've already got a filter in the camera that filters infrared light out, and so you need to expose for way longer. And what the infrared filter does is cut out all the other wavelengths of light, so you only have the infrared light coming in. So there's a couple of things there. Obviously it's a lot cheaper to get a screw-in filter if you've got a tripod. If you just want to experiment with this stuff, then probably a screw-in filter is a good way to go. However, the route that I took was I took an old camera off the shelf that had been sitting there gathering dust. This is the camera. It's a Canon 550D. And this, I think, was the first digital camera. It was the first digital camera that I bought with the serious intention of taking photographs and developing things in that way. And this was probably getting on for 20 years ago now. And it's a great little camera. There's not a million megapixels on it. You can't blow the pictures up very big. However, fitting it with an infrared filter built in, I sent it to a company called Acratech in Sussex, UK, that does a brilliant job of this. But if you're in the States, you can use a company called Calari. Calari have also just opened up shop in Europe. And there are various places you can go in Australia that will do this job. Google is your friend in this matter. There's a lot of places to go. One of the gotchas with infrared photography was always the idea of hotspots. So certain modern lenses create hotspots in the infrared exposure. Which obviously ruin the picture. And weirdly, probably the older the lens and the more basic the lens, the better your chances of getting a really good, even exposure. Now, what I use is this is a crop frame sensor camera. I use the Canon EF 1020 wide-angle lens for infrared, and it really does work a treat. I paid, I think, about £250 for this lens, second-hand, probably 5-6 years ago. And I've been using it for infrared ever since. It really does work well. This picture behind me was shot last week in Granada. And I don't know if you probably can't see here, but there's a nice little detail in this picture. There's a man walking his dog. There's the dachshund running towards him across the frame. So I was actually taking the picture of the building, and because I wanted the trees with their white foliage in the infrared world to lead up into the trees. But this guy walked into the shot And so I waited and gathered a few shots of him to make this more of a sort of hybrid street photography, infrared, architectural photography picture. Not sure if it works, but I'm quite fond of it. So that's the picture for today. Now, other things that you'll need to know about infrared photography. The processing of infrared it follows more or less the same guidelines, and I've got an article on my website that really goes into depth on the processing. Now, one thing to watch out for is that if you're a Lightroom user, or indeed if you're a Photolab user, you'll need to get a camera profile, a DCP profile generated for your camera. Now, when I started doing this, you could download from Adobe software that would generate that profile for you, and it's a relatively simple task, and the effect of the profile is to extend the wavelength of the color sliders in Adobe Lightroom. So what you get with infrared is a very deep red cast, and obviously the antidote to that is to move the slider towards the cool end of the color temperature spectrum, and an evenly corrected profile will come out with a much more of a light brown sort of tobacco tinged picture with a light blue around the anything that's green in the picture. And you can, once you have it in this state, you can then go on to process it as you like. Now, I use a 720 nm filter, and this is a filter that's ideal for black and white photography, not much else. You can get a certain amount of colour out of it. You can get the light blues, you can get a sort of teal look to foliage if you play around with a technique known as colour swapping, and you can do this in Photolab, you can do it in Affinity Photo, you can do it in Adobe Photoshop. All much of a muchness. Probably the most straightforward example of this is Photolab, where you just use the HSL tool and switch the outermost ring to a position 180 degrees opposite where it sits in a normal exposure. However, you do need to have the DCP profile, or the DCP profile is, let's say, helpful in Photolab. The way that I process infrared monochrome is to do my processing in either Lightroom or Photolab or Affinity Photo to get the base picture right. Generally, I will accentuate the structure, I'll accentuate mid-tones to give the picture some presence. I use this a lot for architectural photography. Nobody has ever paid me to do this, but I like the way that architecture looks. You can get a really nice texture to concrete, so the more brutalist the architecture, the better it looks. The other thing that looks radically different, of course, is foliage, trees, which come out white. So there's lots to get your teeth into in this. I use Silver Effects Pro, and what I like to do is to accentuate my whites to get a sort of soft glow to it, and accentuate the texture and clarity in the picture. So yeah, I really recommend infrared photography. It's a real good way to sort of refresh the creative juices. You can do it in broad daylight, which is great. You don't have to get up at the crack of dawn. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. If you want the detail of how to do things like color swapping and so on, it works exactly the same way in Photoshop as it does in Affinity Photo. I've described the way that you'll do this in Photolab, Go to the website, look up the article, and there are screen-by-screen descriptions, which I'm not going to go into in this video because I think it makes for a very long and very dull video. But definitely I would urge you to give infrared a go. It's quite a refreshing thing to do. All right, guys, so thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week with another video. A clue as to what that video might be about is I've managed to get my hands on a new Canon R5 mirrorless camera, and this will supplement the R7 mirrorless and replace the 5DS that I've been using for probably the last 8 or 9 years. So yeah, plenty for me to get my teeth into, and hopefully we'll have a video about these cameras and the difference that they make next week. Don't forget to subscribe. If you like this video, give it a tick. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos about camera work, processing, and Canon cameras in particular, and lenses. All right, so see you next week. Thanks, guys. Bye now.